Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Wine Investigators. I did a really fun dinner in Hinsdale last night for a birthday party of folks who were interested in sake. So I very much had sake on the brain this week. So I thought I would do a little sake snapshot for all of you who may be interested in sake or perhaps have only had it warm in a sushi restaurant. So sake has a tradition in Japan going back pretty much to 2,000 years ago when they introduced rice from China. Originally a government product, it then, very much like grapes, was manufactured in monasteries. And finally, in the last 100 or so years, 100, 200, we've seen individual sake brewers across Japan. It's a really interesting kind of alcohol because it's usually about 15 to 16%. So, the high end of alcohol value for wine, a great deal higher than, anything except like a double, serious double IPA, triple IPA. Interesting process by which it's made. They refer to sake manufacturers as brewers because the process by which they make sake is much closer to that of making beer than wine, even though sake is commonly known as rice wine in this country at least. So what they do is there is a fungus, literally called koji, and once they steam the rice and lay it out, they inoculate it with this fungus. And what the fungus does is it allows the starch in the rice, which has been polished down, there'll be more about that in a minute, and it turns that starch into sugar, which then simultaneously, with yeast introduced, starts turning it into alcohol. So a really unique process. If you think about beer making, your malt is the ingredient that converts the starch into sugar, but it's sequential. In this case, it's simultaneous. Interesting thing to note, there are about 6 important grades of fine sake, and each one corresponds to a level of polish. The exterior of sake rice, like any rice, has sort of a bran layer. It's got fats and lipids, even though sake rice in general is lower in lipids and proteins than table rice. So the measure of quality, at least on the surface, is how much you polish your grain of rice. 70% rice remaining after the polishing would be qualified as junmai, or in the case of fortified sake, hanyoso, a 60% polish left after the polishing process ends would be a junmai ginjo for non-fortified sake, or ginjo for fortified sake. And then the highest grade is a 50% polish, so 1/2 of your rice grain is gone before fermentation. And that is called either junmei daijinjo in the case of unfortified sake, or daijinjo in the case of fortified. What junmai means simply is pure rice. So if you add alcohol, it's no longer just purely rice. As in any, product, a lot of the quality comes from the winemaker. You could polish your rice all you want, but the winemaker or the brewer in this case is the person who creates the flavor nuances, creates the final product, supervises the parallel fermentation I mentioned earlier. So really quite a fascinating beverage with an incredibly long history. It is higher in alcohol, just slightly a notch above like a very, powerful Napa cab. So it's kind of light and refreshing, but you do wish to proceed with caution to a certain degree. Anyway, we have a beautiful sake that's a great selection for everyday drinking. This is from Tozai, and it is their Living Jewels. All of their sakes have this beautiful koi label. And in this case, this is a junmai, so meaning the lowest degree of fine sake. But because it's a really great brewery, it's going to be delicious. So let's give this guy a try. Living Jewels refers to the koi on the label, which is how they are considered in Japan and Japanese aesthetics. Caveat emptor, these closures are very sharp. If you've never slit 2 fingers open at a private event and then had to staunch the bleeding with a cloth mask, you're not me last night. Anyway, so let's give this guy a try. Use a wine glass, be a perfect vehicle. So you can kind of see it has, because it's a little bit higher in alcohol, you give it a swirl, you're going to get those sexy, let's do this again, pieces coming down the glass slowly because the sheeting effect, because it is actually fairly high in alcohol. Almost all sakes are somewhere between 14.9 and 16.2, although of course there are outliers with anything. So we're going to give this lovely sake a smell. This is great. I like their fortified stuff, but I actually really just like the pure rice sake. Interesting point in Japan, sake refers to any alcoholic beverage. So beer, wine, you name it. What they call sake there is nihonshu. So let's give this a sniff. Really gentle nose. But you're getting some good herbs here. Getting some kind of bright sage. Maybe a little bit of bitter melon. And maybe a little lemon verbena. One thing about tasting notes is they're a really beautiful way to connect to a wine, but whatever you smell is what you smell. You know, sometimes there are specific compounds, or certainly the aroma of oak that's unmistakably vanilla. But otherwise, your earth notes, your flower notes, your fruit notes, it's an individual thing. Everyone has a different palate, so you're never wrong. It's just a way of connecting with the wine. So let's give it a try. Oh, this is lush. A lot of, actually, in terms of mouthfeel, affinity with terms you would use for champagne. I'm getting brioche. I'm getting this toastiness. Really, the nose does not kind of prepare you for how rich it is. You're certainly getting herbs. You're definitely getting sage, maybe a little bit of thyme. And, you know, there is a citrus quality to it, but I would say a creamier kind of citrus, you know, almost like a creamsicle. So you've got the citrus, but you've also got a really lovely roundness and lushness. Yep, there's a breadiness. There's a really lovely orange, lime zest, citrus, and certainly those herbal notes as well. So if you've never had really high quality sake that hasn't been warmed up to conceal its flaws, which is why they do it with inexpensive sake, especially in sushi restaurants, it's a revelation. It's something completely new. And if you feel you've reached the end of all your wine regions, you're right back at the beginning with this in terms of fascination. Good night, and remember to, as my friend Megan would say, drink outside the box.